Hey everybody, my name is Trevor Spires with howtoNSX.com, and today this is part 3 of a 3-part series. I'm going to take you through beginning to end the installation and initial configuration of the NSX Advanced Load Balancer, or Avi Networks, and its integration with NSXT and vCenter. So like I said, this is the 3rd video in a 3-part series. I'm going to get right into this one. This is meant to be an idiot-proof guide for how to, from beginning to end, install, configure, and create your first VIP in Avi and how to integrate it with NSXT. So I'm going to share my screen, share my lab with you, and we are going to get off to the races. So just for starters, baseline where you need to be before you even start considering this integration is that you need to have NSXT deployed, right? And you need to have overlay networking enabled, and you need to have a vCenter server, right? There's version compatibility. You can check that in the installation guide that I've linked to in other videos, but that's the bare minimum that you need, okay? What you're gonna wanna do is you need to download the Avi controller, which I've already done. I've downloaded the controller and I deployed the OVA, okay? I'm gonna assume you can take care of that part yourself. All you need is to download the OVA from the Avi website. It needs to be version 20.1 or later. And then you will install that here in your vCenter environment. So all that is right click, deploy OVF template, and then you would give this an IP address. And that's all it is. The IP address needs to be something routable on your network because this controller is going to need to be able to talk and communicate with your NSX overlay networks, so that way it can configure and talk to your Avi service engines, okay? So that's all I've done so far. I've got a fresh vCenter that's not really made for Avi yet. I haven't done any of the pre-work, and same with NSX. So from the vCenter perspective, all you need to do is configure and deploy the Avi controller that you downloaded from the Avi website, and you also need to do one thing, that is you need to create a content library, okay? So the whole idea of this integration is that it's like extremely automated, right? So part of that automation is that the Avi controller automates the deployment of your service engines for you. You don't need to deploy them manually. Avi does it all for you. How it does that is by uploading them to a content library, and then it pulls the OVA from the content library once those are deployed. So I'm just going to create a quick content library for us. So this is going to be Avi SECL. So I'm going to create the content library on my vCenter. Very good. I am going to not change anything. I'm just going to leave it at the default settings. And you just got to point it at some kind of storage somewhere. I'm going to point it at one of my data stores. That's it. You don't do anything else. I don't even need to upload it. The controller will upload the OVA and do all that for me. It just needs to be there. I just need a bucket. That way I can reference it later. You'll see me reference this in a few minutes. That is all you need to do in vCenter. You just need to create the content library and deploy the controller, okay? In NSX, you also don't need to do a lot, but again, I kind of have to assume that you've already got NSX running if you're watching this video. If not, you can reach out to me for help on setting up NSX, but there are a lot of other good content out there for how to install and configure and get NSX working. This assumes that NSX is working in your environment. This assumes that you have configured a tier 1 gateway. And if not, you'll need to configure a tier 1 gateway, okay? In your tier 1 gateway, what you need to do, not a whole lot of work to be done, but you need to do, one step is required and then the other step is optional. So the step that's required is you need to edit your tier 1 gateway, and you need to be sure that you are advertising, redistributing your static routes. I've mentioned ad nauseum in my other videos that we accomplish ECMP through static routes with this configuration, so you need to definitely be redistributing those, and ID redistribute connected as well. That's what the documents recommend, and it's pretty standard to redistribute connected in NSX. So that's all you need to do. It is optional to configure DHCP. I'm doing an all static deployment, but if you'd like to know how to configure DHCP, I have another video that you can reference on my YouTube channel if you need to know how to configure that because you'd like to use DHCP in your environment. So I'm going to stop editing my tier 1. The other thing I need to do is I need to create a couple of overlay segments. The minimum would be 1. You could technically just have 1 overlay segment and have management and your data all on the same one, but it would be best practice to split them apart. So what you'll do is create a segment, and then I've already created mine. I have a management segment and I have a web segment. How you would do that though is simply click add segment. These must be an overlay segment, right? So you're going to have to select an overlay transport zone, whatever one is connected to and working within that tier 1 that you have. And then you're going to need to connect this to that tier 1. In my environment, it's my tenant 1, tier 1, right? You also need to give it an IP. You need to, and this is going to be the default gateway for your service engines, and this is going to be your default, or this is going to be kind of your way in and out of the segment. So, usually that's either a .1 or .254 address. So it would be something like 10.10.50.1/24. All right. And that would be your default gateway for this layer 2 segment. And that's it. So you just got to do that and you click save and create it. Again, I'm not using this one because I already have my management network and my web network configured. All right. And those are both connected to my tenant 1, tier 1 already. Again, that's in NSX, that's the only pre-work you need to do. The only thing I'll caution you of, that it's not in the documents, but be aware, if you're leveraging distributed firewall or gateway firewalls, you're going to want to make sure that you have traffic allowed and that you're not denying the underlying management and control plane traffic that you would need for the system to operate. So just make sure that if you have a deny policy that you are ready to come in and either write allow rules or whitelist the Avi components, okay? That's it for NSX Manager. Really not a whole lot of upfront configuration required. Now is the fun part. Now, most of the rest of this work is going to be done in the Avi controller. So the first thing you do is create an admin account. So you just give it a password. Oops. Don't be confused like me. This is actually a new password. There is no default password. You just create it. That's the first thing you do. I was Googling for like 20 minutes. What's the default password? And it turns out you create the default password. It's not something that's included. So, and again, I forgot to mention, I already deployed this. Remember that I said you need to deploy an OVA? You need to deploy an OVA. It needs to be reachable. And then the initial configuration of Avi is done by navigating to the IP address of the Avi controller in a HTTPS session, okay? And then you're gonna give it the kind of standard stuff that you would put in for most initial configurations for your system. I'm gonna give it a DNS information. There is the option to do backups. So you create like a secret to kind of encrypt your backups. And finally, NTP. They have a bunch of defaults in here, but I have my own NTP server. You can leave it at the defaults if you don't have one. But I have my own. So that's NTP. Localhost, I'm going to leave this as the default. No, actually, I'm going to change it. So this would be, they just want to know if we send any email notifications, what the email address, what it would be coming from. This is how you would do that. You can leave it as a default, but I'll change mine. And then that's it. You could configure an orchestrator here. I'm going to go ahead and say this Avi controller is only really going to be using NSX, so I'm going to say no orchestrator mode because you see here, I have a lot of options, but NSX is not built into this part of the GUI yet. It has to be configured after you finish the initial setup. So I'm going to click no orchestrator mode. And this part, this is something that is TBD. In the documents, it says select no, but I believe it will probably work if you select yes. I just don't know for sure. And according to the documentation, you have to select no. So this is something that maybe you could test on your own and find out. Let me know if you do multiple tenants and it works, but I'm going to follow the documents because I don't have a multi-tenancy requirement. But if you do, just note that this would be something you might want to select yes on, but confirm that it actually works. It's not documented. All right, so I said no on multi-tenancy, and it's just gonna pop me right into my Avi interface, right? It throws me right smack dab into the area where I need to configure and manage my Avi controller. So from here, what do I do, right? What are the first few steps to get this thing up and running with this clean Avi config? Well, the first thing I'm gonna do is this. I am going to go into my infrastructure, and then I'm going to go to my clouds, because this is where you're going to add NSXT into Avi. And I'm going to need to move my beautiful face down here so I can configure this. All right. So all you got to do is go to clouds, and then here's where you create, like, the controller automates everything, right? That's what's cool about it, is it's very hands off. It automates the deployment, spin up, spin down, and everything. In order for it to do that, you have to point it towards the thing you want it to automate. So in this case, that's NSXT for me, right? So I'm gonna name it NSXT Cloud, and then do some initial configurations. All I really need to do is give it an account for my NSX manager and also for my vCenter, and then point it at them. Now, there is least privilege information on the Avi website. If you'd like to follow least privilege and configure a service account, that's probably what I would recommend in production. But I'm just going to give it my local admin account for now. Just note, they do have permission requirements, so make sure you meet those requirements. So my NSX manager IP is 192.168.110.15, and my credentials are going to be just my default credentials for NSX Manager. And this is going to be unique to you, but I'm just going to put in my username and password, click Save. And you have the option to enable DHCP here. I choose not to. If you do enable DHCP, you need to be sure that you've configured your Tier 1 router and the associated segments in NSX to support it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay, so just make sure that if you do that, that you have those prerequisites done. Again, I'm not doing it, so I'm not going to. And they also ask you to create a prefix name. So I mentioned this is going to be automating vCenter and automating NSX through the API. So it creates a bunch of objects. It creates some security groups. It creates some, the service engines. It creates a few different things. So, this is just a prefix that you would put on to the name of anything that is created. So you can call it whatever you want, but it helps us know, hey, this object in NSX or in vCenter was created by the Avi controller, not by an admin, right? So that's really what it comes down to. So I'll just call mine Avi demo. I'm going to click connect on my NSX manager. And so once you connect, actually the controller is going to authenticate to your NSX manager. And once that authentication is successful, you're going to get presented with your transport zones from NSX. So you're going to want to select whatever transport zone that the overlay segments the service engines will run on will be deployed to. For me, it's my Site A transport zone. But again, every environment's different. That's something that's going to be specific to you. So it learns the transport zone. You select that. It's also going to learn about my Tier 1s. So I need to select the Tier 1 gateway. And this is going to be the Tier 1 that I want my service engines to be deployed to. So I'm selecting my Tenant 1 Tier 1. And then the first network I select is my management network. So all I have to do is it's going to automatically fill the segments that are connected to this NSX transport zone. And I just got to select my management network that I created in NSX as pre-work to this installation. Today, only manual segment configuration is supported. Later, automatic will be, which is pretty cool. But right now, you still must select these manually. So this is the management interface. Now, for the data interface and the interface where you put your VIPs, I also need to add that below. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's the same idea. I select my Tier 1 router. And I'm going to do my web overlay segment because that's where the servers I want to load balance to are located. So that's that. You could add multiples here, but I'm just going to do one to kind of keep it simple. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add vCenter. So again, this could be your vCenter IP, and I'm going to, I believe it does accept FQDN. It says host name. I'm using IP though. And again, I'm going to add, click create and add credentials. And so I'm going to call these vCenter creds. I'm going to select the credential type of vCenter, and then this is going to be my vCenter username and password. Okay, so that's it, and I'm going to click save. Hopefully I typed it right, and click connect to make sure everything's popping. I got to give this a name too. It says it could not connect. I've found usually when it can't connect, it's because I've configured the credentials wrong. So I'll reconfigure these credentials. I had that happen a few times, so I will go ahead and add my vCenter again, and then I'll log in. I typed it right that time, administrator at vsphere.local. Save, connect. Okay, good. It connected that time, so I had a typo there. So remember, I created that content library earlier. So once I punch in my vCenter IP and credentials and I validate those and I connect, it's going to automatically learn about all my content libraries. So all I'm going to do is specify the content library I want my service engine OVF to go to and deploy from. So again, it's going to learn that automatically. It's really, really simple stuff. Setting this up is easy and fast. It's just a matter of knowing the pre-work of how to accomplish that. So I'm going to click done. That is it. I'll do a quick review here, but I think I've got everything I need. I got my NSX information. I've got my vCenter information. So I'm going to go ahead and click. Oh, the only other thing, this is optional. You could configure an IPAM or a DNS profile. I'm not, but you could do that. So just, another nice thing you could do, which I believe the DNS, if you do that, I think maybe it will automatically update DNS as you're creating VIPs. So that's a pretty cool feature. And IPAM, I believe that would just allow us to consume IP pools from an IPAM that already exists. But I'm not doing that. I don't have those systems in my lab, so I'm just going to leave those turned off. Click Save, and now my NSX Cloud is being created, okay? It's going to learn about it. It's going to make sure everything's good. Hopefully I get a nice green. Yep, so everything is up and running. It's in progress, so this means that it's starting to do the necessary configurations and in my environments, but mostly right now it's just connecting to my vCenter and my NSX manager. So I'm almost ready to create my first VIP. I only need to do two more small things. One thing I'm going to do, this is kind of optional. I'm going to go to my service engines group, and you need to do a drop down to that new NSX Cloud you just created. All right. And there's going to be a service engine group there. You can create a new one. I'm just going to edit the default though. Like I say, this is optional. For my lab to tune this, I'm going to not reserve memory. And by default, the minimum number of service engines is 2. I just want to change mine to I'm sorry, the minimum is 1. I just want to change mine to 2. And that is because I want this to be operating active. To me, that's the way I want this to operate. This way I want to be showing it to people. So I'm changing that to 2. I'm changing the buffer to 0. That's strictly because I have a lab with limited resources and I don't want to deploy extra service engines. But if this was a production environment for you, you would want to just determine how much buffer space you would like. And you would add buffer service engines. Those are basically like standby service engines ready to take over if there's a failure somewhere for whatever reason. And so I've got that set to 2. And if you don't do this, if you don't set it to 2, then you won't really get an active deployment off the bat. It would be more of an active standby because you would just have the 1 and then you'd have the buffer, right? So I like to have the minimum of 2, but again, this is totally optional. You do not have to change this configuration and it will still work. All right, so I've updated my service engine group. I only have to do one more thing, I hope, unless I've forgotten something, in order to configure my first VIP and for all this automated stuff to be happening. And that is I need to go to my networks, and I'm automatically already here on my NSX Cloud because that's where I was in the last screen. And I mentioned that, and you might remember during the setup, there was an option to select DHCP. I'm not going to do DHCP. If you choose not to do DHCP either, you have to go in and define the IP pools that you want Avi to use for the overlay segments that you specified, all right? And this is not in the documentation, but you need to do it. So I'm going to come right in here. And this would be checked if I had enabled DHCP or you wanted to enable DHCP after the fact, you would enable it here. For me, I am going to do 2 things. I need to come in here, change my routing context to Tenet 1, right? Because this is going to be a Tenet 1 network. I'm going to add a subnet. And the subnet is going to be this is the subnet for my management stuff because this is my Avi management. And I'm going to add a pool. And this is going to be the pool that when my controllers are deployed, they're given management IPs. This is going to be the pool that those management IPs come from, right? So I'll create a pool of 100 IPs. That's way too many for my environment, but I got a bunch of IPs to spare. So here we go. That is all I need to do. So I will go ahead and click save here and just verify everything's good. I've got the right routing context. I've selected my tier 1, my IPs, my pool, all good. I'll select save and save. So that's it. Right now you can see I've got 101 IPs in my pool to use. And I got to do the same thing for my web. So let me just do that real quick. Tenet 1 routing context. I'm going to add a subnet. I'm going to make my subnet 172.16.10.0/24. And this one because that's a different subnet. And then add my pool. Excellent. Click save, save, boom. And now I've got my 2 pools configured. Again, this is a step that's not in the docs, but it's very important because if you're not using DHCP, those IPs got to come from somewhere. So if you're not using DHCP, it either comes from here or probably you can do it from the IPAM as well. But I'm not using that, so I needed to come in here and configure that. All right, let me check my notes, but I believe that's it. All right, I went through content library. Oh, I did miss one small thing. I'm so glad I checked. So there's one other thing that you're going to need to do before you can configure virtual service. All right. And this is, you don't have to do this, but I think this is the best way to do it if you're already an NSX user. So I'll go back to applications, but in my NSX manager, there's this concept of groups in NSX. So I want to load balance my web servers, right? So this is a security group that I've created. And inside of this security group, I have my web servers added. So I can even show you that here, that my web servers are web 01A and then web 02A. Those are the web servers that I've created and that I'm going to be using as the back end to my advanced load balancer. So these are, this is one way to do that. I could also punch in the IPs manually, but I prefer to do it this way because now if the web server changes or something, it'll be updated automatically within Avi. So let me close this. My final step is to create a virtual service. This is where I make my stinking VIP, all right? So what I'm gonna do is create my very first virtual service. So this is how you create a VIP in Avi. It's under applications. So I'll say, I'm going to do a very basic setup because I just want this to go quickly. You can do an advanced setup and have all kinds of crazy persistence profiles and WAF and all these cool advanced settings. But for me, I'm just going to make it pretty straightforward. So I'm going to say this is my first VIP, and I'm going to give it an IP. You do got to give your VIP an IP. So I've created a VIP. It's 172.16.10.21. And what's cool is you'll notice, and I'm going to select my tier 1 gateway. I don't need to tell this what network to put that on, right? Because Avi is smart enough to know, well, in the network's pane, this subnet, this broadcast domain is associated with the web network. So it is smart enough to know, well, I need to just put that on the web network, right? A lot of systems would make you specify the network or the VLAN or whatever. To me, that's kind of like, it doesn't, now that I've seen Avi do it this way, it's like, well, duh, why would I just not have this be automated within the tool? So that's something that's pretty cool about Avi. So all I need to do is create the VIP. I select my port protocol information. I'll just leave it on port 80 for my web servers. And to select the backend servers, I'm going to go to security groups. You have the option to punch in the IPs manually, but if I use security groups, then I can actually consume NSX objects. So I have my web network, right? This is my web network that we looked at in NSX a second ago. It has my web servers inside of it. I'll select that, and then that's going to automatically put my 2 web servers in as the back end for my VIP. I'm sorry, the back end for my virtual service, right? So it's going to be a pool. So I've selected my web server. I've done this initial configuration. I'm just going to click save, and that's it, right? As far the pre-work takes a few minutes, but to actually configure your VIP, it's as easy as specifying those 3 or 4 fields. And what's going to happen now is this is going to start automatically automating all the necessary components to build that VIP out on your NSX network and deploy the service engines into your vCenter. So I can actually see it happening probably. If I go over here and I look at my recent tasks, you're going to see, oh, look at this, vCenter. I didn't do anything, right? This isn't me. This is the Avi controller that's logged into vCenter and has began deploying the OVF template. So it's uploaded that to the content library. It's going to start pushing it down as soon as it can. So this process, because it's my very, very first VIP, when I did it the first time, it took a few minutes. So I'm just going to let this thing run and start deploying. Okay, good. I started to get a little worried about where my second service engine was at, but I guess it just needed a couple minutes to think. Okay, cool. So as you can see here, my second service engine is being deployed now. It just took, like I said, it does take a few minutes, especially when you're running a nested lab like myself. So this is going to be spun up very soon, and we're going to see that appear in our Avi controller as a result of that. Of course, now the second service engine is coming up, and it's going to be booting and then connecting to Avi. And then once that's done, my application will be up and running. And in fact, the app already is partially up and running, right? It's got poor health because it just came up. It's still trying to get a hold of my backend servers, and it's still waiting for that second service engine to come up. But so I'm going to wait and let this churn and do its thing. We're going to come back in a few minutes, and then we're going to take a look at this fully functional VIP that's been automated and completely kind of hands-off deployed by NSXT. Okay, everybody, I stepped away for a few minutes. I haven't touched anything. I've just been letting these things deploy. And right now, you can see both of my service engines, the active pair, are showing as up. So that these have been completely automatically deployed. The health will stabilize soon. Right when you first deploy it, it shows poor health because it misses the first few minutes of uptime where they were booting everything, but these will be all green here soon. And if I go to my application, I'll see both of my service engines are enabled underneath my app. My health score is is decent, it's going to start improving, and I can see from beginning to end my VIP, go into my pool, all the way to my back end servers that I'm load balancing over port 80, right? So that's really it, everybody. I mean, it's load balancing to a web page on these two servers. I didn't have to do anything other than click deploy in the application. I had to create a basic virtual service. The pre-work, like you saw, maybe takes 20 minutes or so to get everything up and running. But after the pre-work is done, it's easy. And now from this point, now that my service engines are deployed, I can start deploying new services like crazy. You know, I can go nuts. I can start configuring these things all day long, and they'll be spinning up, spinning down. I can even scale them up and down within the interface. I can come in and say, hey, I'd like to scale this out, add some more service engines. I like to remove some service engines. It's all at my fingertips now. The power of Avi is now whatever I can do within the configuration of Avi and my service engines and my VIPs, I can do here. It is just a matter of configuring it. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. So again, that was part 3, the final video in this 3-part series covering the integration of the NSXT platform and the Avi Networks or NSXT Advanced Load Balancer platform, getting them to play together. That way you can have automated, elastic, flexible, advanced load balancing and WAF within your NSXT environment for east to west and north to south load balancing. So I hope this has been educational. I believe I covered everything in these last 3 videos that you could possibly need to get this up and running and understand the concepts. Of course, if there's anything that's unclear, I urge you to comment below. I keep an eye on those, so if you comment, I will probably get back to you within a couple days. If you're on my blog watching this video or reading a post, you can, of course, comment in the blog. Also, my contact information is on my blog, howtoNSX.com. So just reach out if there's anything else I can do for you, or if there's anything else you'd like to see, right? This is a lot of fun for me to make. I learned a lot in the process. So if there's any other videos or blog posts that you'd like to see within the world of networking and security, let me know and I will take a crack at it. All right. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, this is a really exciting advancement in my view, really exciting advancement for the NSX core platform, as well as an advancement for the Avi Networks or Advanced Load Balancer platform. It's just a cool additional point of integration that's been added in this most recent release. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's been educational for you. Thank you very much for sticking with me and watching the videos, and happy load balancing. All right. I'll talk to you all maybe never or maybe soon if you know me. All right. Bye, everybody.